Someone once told me time is a flat circle.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I've been your host, Stoney, and this has been the Large Blast podcast. And I was joined, as always, by Matt.
Captain's log, stardate, who the fuck knows?
And Welshie.
It's all timey-wimey space stuff.
And what an excellent time-based episode that was. And as you guys know, in this last part of the show, I like to get things kicked off with a little quiz we call the Lords of Lore.
Oh!
And this week's Lords of Lore, we're going to do, it's kind of like a memory quiz. And it's going to be looking back all that time ago at the start of the show when we were doing hobby progress. And I want to see if we can all remember what each person's hobby progress is. For instance, I'll go first. So I think that Matt's hobby progress was, I'm tempted to say painting a knight, but I think that maybe things have been different. I don't think he's had a lot of time. I think he made some bases for some sisters or something like that. And Welshie, I think that your hobby progress was you painted some Ragnarok models.
Do you want us all to do that?
Yeah, and then all of us do that, and we'll see at the start of the show who was most accurate with their remembrances.
So, interesting, Stoney. I think Matt was probably painting a Bane blade, and I think you were ZBrushing a new soft top version of the Gene Stealer Cult Limo.
Ooh, soft top Gene Stealer Cult Limo. That sounds pretty good, actually. I'm going to get on that immediately now.
Well, I think that, Stoney, I think you've been not doing any ZBrush. I think you've been having a break from ZBrush. And I think that, Welshie, you've been experimenting with a new form of painting style on some non-Games Workshop models.
Well, stay tuned, listener, to find out how right we were at the start of the show.
This cocksucker here, I found him in a storm drain.
You're traveling through time.
I have foreseen it. His compassion for you will be his undoing.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about time in the 40,000 years, in the year now. Who knows? In the 30 minutes it takes to listen to this, in the 2 hours it takes to record it. Who can say? So, Matt, what time would it be right now if we were in the year 40,000?
The Imperium knows what date it would be in their calendar, and I can tell you what it would be. It is I've already fucking lost it. So today's date is 0396.024.m3.
How do they even know that, though, Matt? Like, time in 40k doesn't even make any sense.
Well, it does to the people that have the clocks on Terra.
I guess we better do a whole episode on it, I suppose.
Time. We all know it. The bony hand on the shoulder of us all. But how do you do an episode on time for a fantasy universe? And how do you stop it from descending into us just doing clumsy mathematical equations? I mean, that's why we used Welshie's time machine for Mega Scientists in the first place, to make the editing process easier. But there was just no way we could have known what would happen. You see... fucking... I'm sorry, my cat Tabius Bile has just knocked over my drink. I'm going to have to call you back. You there! What year is this? Come closer, tell me, whisper it in my ear.
Stoney, I've already told you the year. In fact, I've told you the date. It's M3.
Oh my God, I must have fallen into an interested coma. I'm sorry, please come close. Whisper it closer into my ear.
I really want to explain to you how I worked out that the day today is 0396.024.m3. Let me explain. Are you guys ready to learn something?
I was born ready.
Okay. Well, I think that M3 sort of that.
But when was I
pretty
born?
Obvious.
What date was that? Was that M? M a long time ago.
I was going to say, if anyone listening to this is good at making apps, then quite good, or an internet web page, a good idea would be to have an imperial converter where you can put a a date from our reality in, and it
I
pumps
reckon
out.
I can do it on Excel. I'll give
Yeah,
it a go.
all right, give it a go. So there you go. If while she does it on Excel, we'll make it available on our social media.
You do it right now. You just add 40,000 years on the end. What is it? So right now it's 2305,
Do you know?
right?
Do you know what?
2305, 40,000, right? There you
Do you know
go.
what though? I thought it was as simple as that, and actually, when I was reading up on it, it isn't. And actually, it's pretty well thought out. You know, as a arbitrary thing in a science fiction universe can be. And it's more complicated than just adding the time on. But M3, I mean, that's obvious. That's Millennium 3. So that's is based on our own date system. So I wondered whether there must be some sort of imperial clergy making up stories or something in the imperial cult as to suggest what the date system starts from, because obviously we know it starts from Jesus in reality, but
The original
they must have
watchmaker.
they must have made some shit up, or the AdMech are like pulling their hair out for 10,000 years trying to make some sort of equation make sense that relates
They
to the
have
date.
like, at least in 30K, they had Shakespeare and stuff. So
Yeah,
I think they've definitely had records of a bloke called Jesus. I mean, they
or
wouldn't
yeah,
have-
but
they wouldn't have said he was a god. Maybe it was the emperor.
yeah,
Ooh.
that's what I was going to say. Maybe the imperial cult slowly sort of tries to infer that it's the emperor, and there must be some people saying that that's where the imperial dating system comes from. But anyway, it doesn't. It comes from our own time. It comes from Jesus H. Christ. So that's the M. So M3 is now, we're in the third millennium, and 41 would be the 41st millennium. But actually the setting for 40K is now in the 42nd millennium. And I'll just explain the other numbers. So it's kind of interesting. They have a way of dividing the year, because obviously the year that we consider the year is the Terran year. So it's the year of Earth, which is 365 days. That's obviously dependent on the
Forget
planet,
the
so it's very
quarter.
different.
This is very important.
And the quarter, but loads of other planets are different. All other planets are different, and they divide the year by 1,000. So 365 and a quarter divided by 1,000 gives you a divisionable number and a fraction of a year. So to work out today's date, I knew that today was the 144th day of 2024, and that day is split into hours, 24 hours because of Earth. So I multiplied 144 by 24. Then I add the hour of the day the event occurred. So actually, the imperial dating system, if you're near Earth or in contact with someone from Earth, which I'll get into, is quite accurate.
It's fine if you're in contact with someone from Earth. You just ask
Exactly.
them what the time is. It's like that 118. Do you remember 118? It's a bit like that.
Oh, yeah.
Just ring them up and
They
say, "Hey,
probably
it's the talking clock."
But Matt, the key
talking
bit
cherub.
that you've missed out there that I think is really cool about the depth that whoever came up with this bit of lore is that once you've got all those hours, you're going to multiply it by a mathematical constant.
Yeah, the marker constant, which is a made-up number as far as I could find out.
It's 0.11407955, I believe. I've got it up here in the brain, the old noggin.
Yeah, and actually, depending on your sources on the internet, that number then continues. I mean, it's like 40K's version of pi, an infinitely long number that's used in mathematics.
Talk about 40K's pi now. Like, come on, boys.
Well, Stoney, let's skip the actual hours because the next bit might actually interest you. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah, so that would be the check. I think you're referring to, Archie. So the check, the check number. And again, I didn't know this at all prior to this.
This is the first number in the sequence that Matt read out.
Yeah. So basically, as we were saying, if you know or you're in touch with someone on Earth that has a clock, for example, then you know the time because you can ask them the time. So the check number, it goes between 1 and 9, and it explains how reliable your source of time is. So if you're on Earth, you would give it a class 0. So the beginning of the imperial date that you're giving would start with a 0. And that tells you, if you look at any date in the lore, if you pick up an old codex, whatever, if it's got a 0 on it, it means that it's happened on Earth. And a 1 could be within the solar system. It kind of depends on your
like
source.
a really shitty clock on Earth? What if you've bought like a dodgy Rolex off some guy down by the riverside, and now you know? And is there like a market for clocks made on Terra?
Yeah, probably there probably is. Or maybe like the Van Sar people we were talking about. Maybe they've got fancy Terran watches. There probably is a market. I think that if you had a dodgy watch on Earth, then you would give your date maybe a 1 at the beginning. You basically choose what control number to give the date that you're going to give. So if you're
also, it's down to the quality of the seller, as it were. It's like these are some 0 quality Rolexes I've got on the inside of my Mac.
So you travel through the warp for as long as you like. They'll remain 0 quality Rolex.
I mean, that's a fair point. You could, if you want to make the date seem more reliable, you can just put on a good check number. But the idea is that it's a way of.
How would you know if your watch is? You'd be like, oh, that watch looks a bit dodgy. I'm gonna give it a 5.
Hang on, Stoney, I run down like the basic mathematical rules then, and you got bored, and now you're asking all these big out there questions about how reliable
I just want to know.
watches are.
It just feels like it seems like it's a flawed system. If the guy, if like part of it is, it's all these, like you say, these mathematical
heresy,
systems, and then it really all just comes
I
down
can't believe
to the person. How accurate it is really comes down to the guy just being like, I reckon this watch is good.
We've only been talking about time for like 2 minutes, and we're descending into arguments.
Or has
about
it been
time.
2 hours?
Oh.
I think you'll find because I put a 0 in front of it, Stoney, it's been 2 minutes.
Yeah. But the other,
I give your watch accuracy a 9, Welshie. So.
Oh shit! Everyone's always doing that.
Well, 9 is interesting because 9 is the number generally that you'd give if you were in the warp. So again, if you look back at any of your lore books that have been written prior to the Cicadix Maledictum, the Great Rift, then if that time stamp has got a 9 in the front, it means usually that the event that it's recording happened in the warp. So that's quite cool because obviously the warp is in a different time zone, it's in a different dimension. But the class system, so you could, I think 3 and 4 is maybe a class designator that you're sort of saying you or an astropath is in contact with the solar system. So it's like
a bit like
source.
Chinese whispers, right?
It is. It is like Chinese whispers.
You heard it from a bloke, you start going up that number.
So you could have a source that has a source that was in contact with the solar system, and so it goes on. There's like link of Chinese whispers until you get to number 9, which is like you're in the warp and nothing makes sense, and you really don't know. You think you know the date, but you don't really know the date. But
it's cool. I mean, in terms of like the fact that it's this broken down, the lore in 40k is this much depth that someone's thought about this. But not only that, it's something that you see like ubiquitously
everywhere
throughout all codices, because all codices have like written stuff from the Imperium, and
but I mean, really, how real is the timeline? Like, I'm sure they've got in the Black Library it written down, but I'm sure as soon as they're like, oh, I've got a good idea for here, they're like, you know what, let's just scrub that date out and put that one over here. I'm sure that has changed. The actual dates of things, but maybe that's to do with the method of timekeeping. Maybe that's in keeping with the law around it.
I think I mean, it doesn't really matter, does it? But it's good. It interested me that actually a bit of thought had gone into it, other than just writing down the dates. Obviously, it's completely arbitrary, and there's probably law that happens at the same time that overlaps itself that makes no sense if you read the two things
I mean,
we'll
we
come
talk-
across some of that later. Don't worry.
We talked a bit about like the number 9 and the warp, right?
Mm.
Like, does it still apply? Is the warp just like completely its own place, separate from time, as it were? Like, it almost like number 9 is like it's futile to try to keep time, or
Yeah.
like, let's say you were in the warp and then you rung up your mate Gary back on Earth, and you're like, "Hey Gary, what time is it there?" Would that even matter, or would it just like?
That is a really good question. I do
Yeah.
not know.
So
Would it just come through it like every time he tries to say it's
But-
9 o'clock?
but
It just goes.
I don't think that that a ship in the warp can contact a ship out of the warp.
Oh, come on, that's a
But
get out of jail free
but
card.
I think there is stuff that about like, although the warp itself has no time, it's really difficult to keep your own time in the warp.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
experiencing time, and that's quite difficult to do, because I think there's like some of the astropaths and stuff are able, like they're renowned for being able to keep time within the warp. Like, it's really
Yeah.
important, because you need to know how long you've been there, even if when you pop out the other side 20,000 years has gone past and it only seems like 6 minutes. It's still important to know 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that's difficult to keep track of, and there are kind of specialists that are capable of doing that despite the warp around them.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess in some ways it's because the warp has always been like the kind of, in a way, the classic kind of black hole MacGuffin that you see in like, you know, some of these movies where, like you say, you know, you go in and you're there for 5 minutes and you come back and everyone you know has turned old or whatever, and like so the warp must have its own kind of time in a way.
Yeah. I mean,
and what about the webway? Because you can travel in the webway really fast. Is that just like super speeded up in the webway? Is that just time?
I think that's space. So without getting too physicsy, space and time in real life are interlinked, right? But I think by folding, this is the interstellar, folding the bit of paper,
broken pencil.
Yeah. The
classic
time,
explanation.
The time within it doesn't change, but if you bent space around you, you could appear somewhere quicker than you should.
Okay,
is how the webway works, I believe.
Yeah, that's
whereas the warp is magical. Time is in constant flux.
Maybe that could be an artifact. Maybe one of those dodgy watches you buy off old Gary down by the riverside actually tells the time in the warp. That's why it's so shit.
Yeah, it made me think, because we've mentioned before about the talking about artifacts, about the hourglasses that more recent models have had on them. There's the Space Marine characters that have got hourglasses. The Inquisitors do. There's the new Death Corps of Krieg. I say new, but the plastic Death Corps of Krieg kit. The sergeant has an option to be looking at his wristwatch, to be ticking over the time for. I guess each hour.
I guess that still exists in a military. Do you know what I mean? I guess that every faction still has we will attack at 3 o'clock style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
or 0800 hours. You know, whatever.
Yeah, obviously it's a tie into the First World War. But I wondered whether there was any other stuff
that must exist. I still assume that must exist, even for like Tyranids or something. Maybe they just like the vibe is right now or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I don't think Tyranids have time.
But I mean, I think that they have time in the same way that like flowers know when to bloom or whatever.
Okay, yeah,
you know,
it's
kind of like they just know, they can kind of sense that the time is right.
Yeah.
But Matt, so presumably with such a detailed to the 1,000th of a year dating system, everybody's in agreement that today's date is today's date, right?
Well, no. See, this is the thing. I mentioned that if you look at any of your old codexes and law books, you'll see the way the dating system is written up until the Great Rift, because that's when everything changes a bit. And it changes a bit because the Great Rift has torn the galaxy in half. A lot of planets are completely screwed. Their time zones, they can be in like a bubble of time almost as if they're in the warp. Some of them may have been in the warp, where time is acting on them differently. It's had huge effects all over the Imperium. Everything is sort of broken down a bit. And now we are a few hundred years after that cataclysmic event. Guilliman has had a bit of time after the Indomitus Crusade to start looking in a bit more detail at the Imperium. And he, because he's a Primarch, works out that none of the dating system really makes any sense anymore. And he has a few people look into it. He also speaks to the Ordo Chronos, I think it's called, which is a part of the Inquisition that looks at time, which we can go into in a bit more detail. And he has his own scientists and historiographers, I think they're called, look into it. And between them, they all work out that the dating system's completely fucked. Over 10,000 years, basically everyone's just lost count. He reckons the time, it's something, he reckons it could be anywhere between the early 41st millennium or an entire millennium later. So the Imperium could be like 1,000 years out. Nobody's quite sure. So he basically works out a new dating system for the Imperium. So any lore books that have come out since the Great Rift, so all of the new stuff, probably the new rule book, I haven't actually looked, but certainly all the new codexes that are coming out that we've been talking about will have a dating system which designates events that have happened after the Great Rift. So the Great Rift has become like a bookmark in time that Guilliman is using to have everyone date from.
A bit like the switch between AD and BC, I guess.
Yeah, I
but
guess.
More dramatic,
Yeah.
more accurate.
Yeah, and he's also instructed the Imperial dating system to work a bit differently. So time is a lot more locally controlled, where star systems. So although we spoke about the Imperial dating system, we didn't really say, I mean, a planet in the Imperium would have its own time system. You know, that local planetary defense force would be run, you know, that wristwatch that the guy's wearing is time based on their planet.
It would be a pain in the ass if your local year was like 10,000 times slower than the Terran year, but you still had to split it into 1,000 slots.
Yeah.
So suddenly your days are your Terran time is massive.
But I guess also it depends. It depends how you experience time as well. Like if you are like a Necron that lives for like 10,000 years, then then you're going to be you're going to think that the kind of the human like time schedule is a bit too quick for you, aren't you? But if
I think that
like
perception of time's interesting. See, as you've raised it there, we'll get back to the specific differences post Great Rift in a second, but there are loads of different things in 40k that see time differently, right? Like far seers that can see the future, back to Sanguinius and his brother that can see the future. Even I was thinking like Tau, where their lifespan is like really short, so they evolve faster. They're living like 50 years, whereas humans are living 200 to 300 years if they're rich, even longer. Time perception is different throughout races and where things live.
Yeah, definitely. If you're Death Korra Krieg, you live to like 15 or whatever.
And you mentioned
like a mayfly.
You mentioned Necrons, but yeah, the people like Belisarius Cawl, the tech priests that have sort of mutated themselves out of their humanity in a way, and they've become way more machine. Their machine logic must change their perception of time to a weird degree because they're no longer necessarily on a human lifespan, and they have all their consciousness locked and saved in a machine.
Everything that you could even accomplish in your human lifespan is like every possibility, all your potential that you could accomplish in your human lifespan is like nothing compared to what he could accomplish in like his robot lifespan. You know, it's He's got to
Yeah.
change his perception of people.
And even
Yeah.
like within the Tau, actually, I was reading because little confession here, gentlemen, I bought the fruit box. Not that
Oh,
I-
we knew it
not
was
that
going to
I-
happen.
not
Tick that
I
off
have
on
a-
your bingo card at home.
I
if
don't
you've
blame
got it
you.
on there.
The group box is amazing.
But I still don't have a Tau army.
Yeah,
I've
the
been reading
orc
the
fruit
codex,
box. I remember that. Yeah,
Ooh.
and the ethereals don't age. So the Tau are all aging really quick, and no one knows why the ethereals
Typical.
don't age. So it's just another string against the ethereals
Yeah.
being something weird.
Yeah.
Little pheromone producing weirdos jacking off
Yeah.
into T-shaped holes.
Mm.
Like, so that's another thing. Like, even within systems, like if you're a guy on Necromunda and you know the person running the city is going to live for 500 years, and you're lucky to make it to 80 on sump, crock, and fucking
yeah,
corpse starch, that's got to be a real heavy hit.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's when your goals change when you're presented with those two different kinds of timelines, isn't it? Like the Sump guy, he just wants to go on holiday to the Hive Necromunda version of Magaluf, and the guy up top, he wants to take over the entire planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So who won this war then, Matt? Presumably Gilliman has now said time starts here and everyone's listened to him, have they? Or
Well, no. You mentioned a war. We haven't mentioned the war. You've mentioned the war before.
I
we
meant
had
a
the
war
time.
of words.
Okay. Well, there was a war. There is a war. There's an ongoing war. It is a war of words. It's so Gulliman uncovers it when he realizes that the dating system's all a bit screwed. He uncovers the Ordo Chronos, which, as I said, was a Ordo Minoris, so minor ordo of the Inquisition, and it was set up before the Great Rift. It was set up to investigate time anomalies and to investigate situations where ships are lost in the warp for lots of time and come out of the warp. But also specifically much more rarer instances of when ships go into the warp and go back in time, which is really interesting. So I thought these guys are a bit like Men in Black. They go around. They used to go around and investigate time anomalies around the Imperium, but they were set up in a particular area of space where I think they happened more frequently, called Jericho Reach, which I'm sure we've mentioned about is that not in the Ghoul Stars? I can't remember.
I think we have talked about it. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are lots of temporal anomalies in that area, and they were set up to investigate them because people within the Imperium and the Imperial cult were concerned that if different people can go back in time or forward in time, that could affect who says what, or the supposed word of the Emperor. They can have an effect on time, which we can all understand.
I think we definitely talked about the Ordo Chronos or whatever it is, the time guys back in the. I think
Inquisition
we've definitely mentioned. Yeah, we've definitely touched on them because I remember thinking it was a crazy thing at the time.
Yeah, well, then they disappear. So the insinuation is,
they're like Time Cop. They're like Jean-Claude Van Damme, Time Cop.
Maybe they, but by the time Gilliman is finding out all this stuff after the Indomitus Crusade, they're back around. So there's more. So they kind of exist again. The insinuation is that they're different Inquisitors. So who knows what happened to the first batch? They're around, and Gilliman uncovers the fact.
What happens if the first batch is like one of them's just the Emperor? They just went back that far, and he was like, "Got where I'm Jack."
I know. Yeah, I know what to do. I know the lottery numbers.
Yeah.
And he finds out that there's been this war of words called the Chrono Strife, which is an ongoing war within the Ordo Chronos about the dating system, basically just arguing about what the date is. And fighting over how it's degraded with dogma and sort of revisions over time. As you can imagine, the Imperium's got more religious, and that religious aspect has affected the way that they record time. Like our own time system.
I mean, it's great, isn't it? This is just like people fighting over BC versus BCE.
That is, I
Because you
didn't think
can't
of that,
have it
but that's
before
so
Christ.
so very true.
And people fighting over, well, what is AD if Christ was born on a different day? Why should everything be about Christ if we're not all Christian? It's this bureaucracy in 40. I love it.
Yeah. Gilliman sort of put it to a stop a bit. I mean, again, it's sort of implied that it's still carrying on, but Gilliman has brought in this new dating system, which
Tinder. Grinder.
Which he basically made
Grinder for aliens, so now you can bang an alien.
he made the High Lords of Terror. He made the High Lords of Terror impose it. So all the new dates run on this new dating system, which to me, I mean, you just mentioned bureaucracy. I think it's quite interesting actually how they've written this into the law. That if we keep talking about our own world, in our own world, control of time is what great empires and civilizations have always striven for. And no exception with Britain as well. In Britain's case, it was all to do with naval power, naval trade, and controlling time when ships were at sea so that they could plan where they were going to be at a specific date and knew where they were. And when we were able to create clocks that the Navy could run on, as a reason why Britain then controlled the seas. And it's kind of happening in the opposite way, where they've written in this law where Gilliman is making it more bureaucratic to keep time in the Imperium. The Imperium is like losing control of time. It's reverting back to a medieval state.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's pure 40k, isn't it? We always talk about how it's medieval Europe in space.
Well, I mean, time
is quite
interesting. Time is a conflict of its own, really, isn't it? It's always a battle. Time, isn't it? You've got to be there at the right. I mean, the proper solution is applied at the right time, isn't it? It's not like it's never a. You've got to be there at the right time. The whole siege.
Sounds like you've been reading the Codex Astartes.
Well, that's it.
Solution is applied at the right time.
But I think it is something like that. But I think that is something like that in the Codex Astartes, isn't there? There's like the whole Siege of Terror. A whole bunch of the Primarchs, a whole big part of their story is they weren't there to be there at the right time,
And it was Gilliman wasn't there on time.
He wasn't even there on time, and now he's making up the time.
Now he's changing the time.
What he's the guy down at the thing selling the dodgy Rolexes.
He just wants to retreat back to Macragge and his 500 worlds. I just think it's quite interesting how he's smart enough to work out what is going on, and yet he's essentially giving away the power to control time on Earth to individual star systems and star clusters, which in a way means that
that's his whole deal, isn't it? Nobody has given away the power to other people so he can just be Gilliman on his own.
Well, that's fair.
I'm going to set the night to 4 times longer so I can bang Ivraid even harder. That's what he's saying.
It's just,
I'm changing everything to Tau calendar. I'm going on holiday.
So it's another aspect where the Imperium, since the fall of Cadia, has really degraded actually a lot more than you just see by reading the lore books about all the battles and planets. You read that all the time. It's a million people dead. That's it. But actually, this is quite big. It's quite big that they're losing control of time.
It's a really 40k thing, I think, when you look at the way that the time works. To instead of changing the year, to keep the year in a sense that comes essentially from 60 minutes in an hour, which goes all the way back to the Sumerians, counting on their fingers, each individual digit gets you to 12. That's where time comes from. But instead of changing that, they split the 365 and a quarter year into 1,000. They could have just done away with it and decimalized the year.
Maybe they've grown more fingers in the future.
Although that works quite well
mutants. They've got a mutant there doing the counting.
Does that work better with binary? You can work with 12 with binary.
Who knows?
But
I mean, there's some
maybe
weird
the
time
AdMech are
systems
like,
in real
yeah,
life. Like the Incas
yeah.
do stuff in a real weird way, where years like a not consensual. They follow on
We've
Consensual
all
through
agreed a
time.
minute has passed.
It's all about like the days are. There's like a because of the quarter, they worked out the number of days rather than the number of. Yeah, there's wild ways of doing it, but it's cool that it's some weird mismatch of numbers.
I mean,
And then-
how would we if we started colonizing the solar system? I mean, I guess it's still so close to Earth, it doesn't really matter. You're around one sun. But if you were like in Proxima Centauri, would we rely on like what are they called? Like astro clocks? What are the
Well, yeah, but then also Stoney mentioned black holes are always used, but that's before you even put gravity into the equation, which literally can affect time.
But I mean, that's the thing. It's like that's why they need to have these MacGuffin guys that are like, oh, he's the guy with the big mega chimp prolax brain or whatever who can like just sort this stuff out. Who like Gilliman can turn to and be like, what's the time?
What's the time?
Imagine if just imagine the logistics of like being in space and trying to like imagine you're being attacked on 3 different fronts on 3 different planets.
Yeah.
All have their one of them's like a year takes 1,000 years Earth time. One of them it happens in 2 minutes.
Well,
you know, like how do you say, okay, these guys need to attack at 3 o'clock, these guys need to attack at 4 o'clock, these guys, you know what I mean? Like
I'd written in my notes actually, because I'd been, I thought about the Krieg guy with his watch as an example in the model range of where they're actually looking at the time. And then I was trying to think in Black Library if there are any cases that I can remember where they were talking about time.
I think that this stuff must just be handled. Because like this is a fictional universe at the end of the day. I think this stuff must just be handled by the computer said attack now or whatever. You know what I mean? It's
actually, and that may be
fair. That might happen in real life before too long. If we start doing like
that is true. This episode has sort of reminded me of there's a cutscene in what's it called? Battlefield Gothic 2, the computer game. There's a cutscene where maybe it's like the introduction, I'm not sure, but your character, you play the Admiral, you're in a ship that has been lost in the warp, and the cutscene begins where you come out of the warp and you see the ship coming out of the warp and you see you hear him broadcasting a message and the bridge crew broadcasting a message out, which is like the first officer or someone says to the admiral that the stars are in like a different position, and they rework out what they think the date is, and they've been in the warp for 900 years. And it all happens in like the minute of a cutscene, and the ship broadcasts like we're the Emperor's giant fist or whatever it's called, and is any Imperial units out there? And yeah, I mean it's quite cool, and in a way certainly that the Black Library is written. Now if something came from 900 years in the past, it would be like a revelation. But in the Imperium, if a ship is lost in the warp for 900 years and it comes out, they'd be like, where's some other Imperial units? Oh, there's a fleet over there. They could join them. They would be no different, and none of them care. Like they're like, oh,
maybe that's like part of what that Inquisition Kronos does is they go and investigate the ships that just appear 900 years later, and it's like, hey, here's me with a current paper, like I don't know, just like, check it all out or whatever.
Well, maybe the Imperial Star System, Imperial starships have got like I imagine that they've got huge holes full of candles, and someone has to burn a candle specifically so they know what time time it is.
There are definitely people, because who's the Grey Knights guy that's just in the warp fighting constantly?
No, it's not Voldus.
No, who's the guy that got lost?
Carl Drago.
Oh, Cal Drago.
That's it.
Yeah. Like he's been just lost in the warp, isn't it? And they keep going on about how he's gone like insane because in his mind he's been there for like 4,000 years. But who knows? Like, what would happen if you sent him in with like a wristwatch on? What would it say when it came out on the other side? Like, who knows?
Well, these are all good points, right? And we know that the warp does weird timey-wimey stuff, and we could we could spend ages talking about all the people that have popped into the warp and popped out at different times. But there are exceptions to this nice regimented progression of time in 40k. There are the time travelers, the people that straight up break this wall. They ain't lost in the warp. They can do stuff about it.
Yeah.
All right, so the first time traveler I've got for you boys is a bit of a comedy one, which I enjoyed, and this is referenced in the Orc Codex, and it's a guy called Grizzguts. So this is an Orc war bus called Grizzguts, who's known for his kleptomania, and they do a big glowing green warp jump with him as he sets off on a war, and something goes wrong in the warp jump, and because of orcs and because of his kleptomania, they actually end up in the past, and Grizzguts meets himself in a classic time travel paradox, and he decides the best thing to do is to kill himself so he can have a second one of his favorite guns.
Brilliant. I mean, that's orky decision right there.
Super orky. And everyone gets so confused, all of the orcs meeting their past selves, that the war completely stops in its tracks, and Grizzguts is just sat alone with his dead corpse and his 2 guns. So I thought that was
it doesn't
really
even
nice
get
story.
to like. Oh.
No, nothing happens afterwards. It's just a little like.
Does he not like fade away in photographs and stuff?
No,
like
orcs,
Back to the Future stuff. Oh, okay. Right.
He just wanted a second gun,
Right.
There's no real paradox
He
lore
never
in
gets
that.
to use it though.
No.
It's like a Twilight Zone episode.
But I thought that was a fun little snippet, little box in an Orc Codex that says sometimes the Orc war jumps can go all over the place. And although in my little intro to this I said that it's not all about jumping into the warp, there was another warp anomaly that I liked that I thought was interesting. It shows up in Guy Haley's book called Death of Integrity, and it's set in M39. Now we know dates. A Space Hulk appears, and it's investigated. This is a whole novel investigated by the Blood Drinkers, the Nova Marines, and the Mechanicum. Go and investigate this Space Hulk that's just appeared, and it's full of gene stealers. But it's also something really odd about this Space Hulk. And the Blood Drinkers chapter master called Cadis goes a little bit mad, killing all of the gene stealers, and has a full black rage fit and starts turning into a demon. It's a really cool book. He starts turning into a demon as they're exploring this Space Hulk. And as the Mechanicum and the Nova Marines that are still in control manage to get to the center of the Space Hulk, one of the ships that's formed this like massive kind of writhing metal floating through space is an old AI controlled vessel from the dark age of technology. Think like HAL in 2001 that's stuck in the middle of this Space Hulk. And it basically turns out that this AI has time traveled through the warp from like M15, some M around that time.
Yeah.
Has been floating in the warp and is in control of the entire happenings of the Space Hulk, and tries to subsume all of these space marines and suck them back into the warp. But they managed to escape because it's a fucking Black Library book. But it's cool that there's this sentient AI controlled Space Hulk that's kind of purposefully moving in and out of the warp and appearing at different times in an age where the abominable intelligence is gone.
So, I mean, we've talked a bit in the past about stuff like the Men of Iron and things like that. When would they have been? Would they have been on this same time? Or is there almost like a new time thing for each section
be
of
on
time?
The time bit. I don't know exactly when the dark age of technology was. I mean, it's before 30k and after.
Yeah.
So when do the records begin, kind of thing?
Now, right now, yeah. I've got confirmation here from the Ordo Xenos that the dark age of technology happens somewhere between M15 and M25.
Oh, okay. It's got dates.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I just remember talking about Black Library. Wasn't there like 2 months ago this big hoo-ha because there was a Black Library book that insinuated that the Emperor was Jesus Christ?
Yeah. There's an insinuation.
Happened. Yeah.
I don't believe that the insinuator's there. I think that's people reading too much into it.
Anyway,
no,
that's
they've never ever insinuated that. Like, there's no religious overtones to like.
Anyway, that's by the by. That's
very heavy-handedly say that he's Alexander the Great, though. That's very much pointed to.
Yeah,
which is cool.
I'm the emperor. My first name was Jesus.
Talking about another time traveler that we get, where all of that kind of roughshod bullshit history stuff that we get, which I love, I absolutely lap that up. Carry on, Black Library. Is Orlanius Pearson, who's a character that runs throughout the Horus Heresy.
That name, yeah.
He's mates with John Grammaticus.
John Grammaticus.
I can speak any language I want, but I choose this stupid American accent. Orlanius Pearson, you might remember, because Ollie Piers is the guy that fights Angron. Ollie Piers is the
he's
stalwart
the trooper.
Imperial Guard trooper that faces down Angron. And
I always think of Ollie Murs when I hear that. Because it's just too normal a name. Why is Ollie Pierce in there?
Well, they have Ollie Piers because I think way back to like Rogue Trader, there's this involvement of this character that's like a bit of a mate of the Emperor called Ollie Piers. So they set up this Ollie Piers character who's a red herring, the real mate of the Emperor, as it turns out, as the Siege of Terror carries on, is Orlanius Pearson. Who really is involved in. He's
the guy with the more silly version of the name is the real character.
And he's the guy that is also lived forever, is a perpetual that's been mates, that was on. They describe like he was on the boat with Jason of the Argonauts, who's the fucking Emperor. He was like in the high command of Alexander the Great. Like he's the Emperor's best mate, and he's the one that convinces the Emperor to give up the powers of chaos, essentially. But he has this whole storyline in the Horus Heresy where he gets a knife called an athame, which allows him to cut through space and time, and him and his retinue get lost for years, and they end up spending 2 years in the time of the Men of Iron. So they go on this crazy journey where they slice through time. Think Time Bandits, where they open up a door and suddenly they're like in a different time period, looking to get to Terror in time for the siege. So
each jump will be his last.
It's so cheesy.
What was that? What was that show with Stephen Bakula or Mike Bakula?
Yeah,
what was the guy? Bakula. What's that thing?
They parody it on Sunny, don't they? On Always Sunny.
But he keeps going every time he goes back. It's like hoping each jump will be his last. Each jump is something jumper. I
remember. Count Bakula from.
So I mean,
Ruby will know. Ruby.
Steve Bakula.
Steve Bakula. What's the name of the series he's from? Oh, she's not listening.
I saw a great game trailer last night. I don't know how I ended up seeing it. Where there's a game coming out where you can be modern. You can be fitted out as like a modern infantryman, or you can drive a tank in medieval Europe. And it looked fucking amazing. Like there's a guy driving a tank and he's like firing it at a castle, and there's like siege, and there's like Battle of Agincourt, and he's just driving a tank through them all. It looks fucking amazing. Anyway,
sounds great. So
Quantum Leap.
Right, Scott Bakula.
Oh, I was always a fan of Bernard's Watch. When I was a kid,
where he pauses time.
Yeah, that's fucking amazing. That would be my superpower.
So next up in my list,
I've seen some pornos like that.
Yeah, that's what I used to think about when I was 14. What can I get up to?
I can look up girls' skirts. If only I could quantum leap back to a time where we didn't have that conversation.
Three dweebs and Scott Bakula, desperately searching for a universe before that time they had that off-colour conversation on their Warhammer podcast.
We can do it, gang.
Jumping from universe to universe, hoping each leap will be their last. In this, Quantum Geek.
So my next main character that it's shown time traveling abilities is Gideon Ravener, Inquisitor Gideon Ravener, protege of Eisenhorn. This is the guy that's confined to a chair, but is like a super psyker that can literally inhabit the bodies of his retinue like puppets. And in the book Ravener Rogue, obviously by Dabnett, one of the best trilogies in all of Black Library, he's hunting a guy called Zygmunt Moloch, who is attempting to decipher Annuncia, this like ability to speak a word and cause destruction. And whilst he's trying to find this guy, he goes to what they call a witch house. He finds this secret witch house, and in the witch house is a 3-way door into which to peer into the future that you desire. So you kind of open the door and you look
the witch
into
house
the
for a freeway. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, he's gone to Charmed. He's like, this isn't Charmed. Where's Alyssa Milano? Anyway, he opens Alyssa Milano's door and he looks into the future. And it turns out that this guy, Zygmunt Moloch, this is all a trap. And they push him and his mates through the door. And he ends up the other side of the door. And it turns out that it isn't just like a view into the future. It is a portal into the future. And what happens to them when they're on the other side of the door is they get attacked by Tyranids. And this may not seem in the world of 40k to be odd. But earlier we were talking about getting really dweeby about dates. And I picked up on this, and so have many others on the internet. Tyranids do not appear until 745.m41. But Ravener's storyline is 404.m41. So 300 and a bit years before the Tyranids appear. So he has clearly jumped into the future by going through that door.
Tyranids eat everything. Confirmed.
So yeah, he sees the Tyranids before they even arrive, but no one knows what they are. So there's this wonderful panel where they're just talking, and the description is, these are Tyranids. Like, anyone knows what a Tyranid looks like, that's what they're talking about, but they don't know what they are.
Well,
and it's a real brutal fight.
And this is super time travel episode conceptual, right? But like, obviously there is in the year 40, in the 40k universe, fate kind of exists because we have these Primarchs and stuff that can foresee the future and things like that. So, but maybe when you jump forward in the 40k universe, you're experiencing the fate that would happen as things are going at the time.
But I think that you're talking about like kind of time branches and alternate future realities and stuff there, which I actually am happy that 40k has never really delved into. I like that it's reserved itself from this multiverse math.
Oh yeah,
I mean, for sure. I mean, I think you know, without naming any other franchises, we can see what a mess that just leads to. You know,
for sure.
Yeah.
So Ravener, though, the reason I put him as actual choice time traveler rather than push through a door and the dates don't match is that there's then a sequence of events where they go through multiple doors arriving at random times throughout history. But he is such a super psyker that he manages to be able to focus how they travel back to a particular time. And he's like a few hundred years out where they want to be and then can really narrow it down. So he kind of develops this slight psychic affinity for moving through time if the ability to move through time is given to him, which is pretty cool for a guy who's like a super high level psyker. But it's not enough to put him on top of my list as best and most interesting time traveler. That goes to Chronomancer Supreme. And it's worth saying that the Necrons have a whole field of study around time. Chronomancers, they're playable characters on the board. They can pause time for a little bit. They can speed it up. They can mess around with it slightly. But the king of Chronomancers...
If you play the pause time rule on the battlefield, does that mean the other guy has to stand still and you go down, tie his shoelaces together, pull his trousers down and shit?
Steal his dice.
Yeah.
Turn them all to ones.
You get to ethanol him.
And the guy that's most likely to turn his opponent's dice all to ones is a guy we don't talk about much, because we often talk about his arch nemesis a lot, favourite of the show, Trazyn the Infinite. But this is Orican the Diviner, probably, you know, one of the top 3 biggest Necron named characters after Imitate the Stormlord, and Trazin, and probably the Silent King, but so maybe number 4. But he is a proper time traveler, and he is the only one, as far as he's aware, that is able to time travel within Necron, and he can go back within his own timeline, and he refuses to tell anyone about it. So he is like arch chronomancer. And what does he use it for? He uses it to maintain his reputation for looking up people's skirts, and to maintain his reputation for being Orican the Diviner. If he realizes something he's predicted is not about to become true, he goes back in time to make sure it does, so that his reputation as a good future predictor.
Well, wouldn't he just go back in time and tell himself what's actually going to happen?
Yeah.
And just
No. He then returns to his own timeline and takes all the credit for predicting incorrectly. Because there's one thing
he's the opposite of this show. We could have done with him on these Fulgrim predictions.
There's one thing he cannot predict, and that is the warp. So if there's no warp involvement in something, his ability for astromancy, which is predicting the future based on the stars, is like 100% accurate, but he can't predict the impact of the warp. So sometimes he has to go back. An example is he predicts an entire Imperial naval base is going to be destroyed on Helios 6. But then some Space Marines appear from the warp and stop it from being destroyed. So he goes back in time and destroys the Space Marines as soon as they appear, so that he can be like, fuck you all, I told you the orcs were going to destroy the Imperial naval base, and I was right. And that's like his whole vibe.
He's got the quick save thing going on.
That's right. He does another thing where he has like, again, like a Rick and Morty episode, where he has like a save point and things keep going wrong, and he just keeps reverting the entire like planet he's on to the save point until he gets it right. So he is like the time traveler, and eventually in his kind of storyline, he has rules for this on the board, if you roll really lucky, that all of these plans he's put in place throughout the millennia that he's been around will one day all come into stellar alignment, and he will ascend into a being of pure energy.
What, like a Catan?
Yeah, I think he's trying to make himself into a Catan by setting up all of these
just being right all the time.
Universe.
He's like the Catan of pub quizzes kind of thing.
Yeah,
he just
but if that's interesting, like listen or read Infinite and the Divine, which is him fighting Trazin over like a period of 10 million years. Except Trazin doesn't know that he can keep going back and changing time, and it's a real great read. It's really, really good.
This reminded me of the episode on Warhammer Plus, the animations, where it's the Trazin, the Infinite episode, and there's the Chaos Terminators that are kind of stuck in a loop, reliving a moment in time because they're in or they're about to go into one of his tesseracts, and they're kind of replaying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
So that's just like Trazin, as not a chronomancer, just a technomancer, has access to technology. So high up Necrons have access to technology to just put people in time.
So that's technology basic. To create a time loop.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that this guy keeps going back in time to affect stuff that just changes him, because surely like it's the old, oh well, why don't you just go right back in time and kill Trazin as a baby or whatever, you know? I mean, it's like, but I think if you've got time travel capabilities and you just keep going back to make yourself look cool, it's like this guy's balling.
It speaks to the Necrons' whole like thing of, you know, they're just looking after themselves. Really, they might talk about empire, but actually they just care
super,
about themselves and their own power,
like
and
royalty
he doesn't want to do
sort of thing.
Anything that's not going to result in him being a Catan.
Is this the model that we've got up on the screen at the moment?
Yeah, that's his new model, his reinvented one for.
I really like the model for him. I think this model's really cool. But I will say, for someone that fought Trazin the Infinite, he is on quite a smaller scale. Like he doesn't seem as visually impactful to the lore and stuff as Trazin the Infinite on his flying throne with two random pieces of scenery that come with him.
You're thinking of the Silent King, mate. That's why.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Who's Transit? Or is the Siren
He's
King not
also a smaller figure.
Oh,
yeah,
is he?
Transit is just
yeah,
like this
yeah.
guy with a cape, basically.
Well, I only know one Necron, it turns out, and it's not this guy. But I like this model; he looks cool. In the picture we're looking at, it looks like he's offering some Turkish delight in the form of like a weird shaping cube.
So those are my rundown of Time Traveler Supremo. But we can't get away talking about time without very quickly, because I talk about them almost every episode. It feels like the Hrud, the Xenos race that literally do warp time about them as they go into battle. They're also known as the Tempora Ferox because they do that. They're chronomantic and chronophagic. They manipulate the flow of time around them. They cause entropic decay in everything they touch.
Where do they come from?
They are kind of all around the universe, actually, and they're referred to right from books from M30 in the Iron Warriors early Horus Heresy stuff to M41. They kind of exist in the holes. They're troglodytic. They live underground everywhere. They have what's called the sark, which is this like shimmering heat haze around them that if bullets touch, they can start going backwards, or they just dissolve and disintegrate into rust. No one knows what they look like, which is convenient for Games Workshop, because in half the material they look like rats in cloaks, i.e. Space Skaven, and half the material they look like Swamp Thing. And now they've got this no one really knows what they look like because there's a sack mirage of time around them. So when we eventually bring them out, we can make them look however we want. But they're really cool, and any storyline where people are fighting them is great. It's like battle lines of Space Marines running into close combat and just rusting more and more every step they take until they can't move and then just being shot to pieces. And they have migrations, like migratory birds, where entire Hrud populations will converge, migrate through a star system, and cause complete entropic decay of an entire planet that they move past. Not in the same way Nurgle does. It's not rot. It's just pure time.
Yeah. I wondered whether there could be just some interesting link with the Ordo Kronos in the Jericho, whatever it was called, the Jericho system, Jericho subsector, where like maybe they were fighting them. Who knows? But if they're from everywhere, they're
there's loads of stuff that says no one knows what they look like because they physically cannot be seen because of this sack shimmer around them. Maybe they're the Ordo Xenos from M70 come back to M40 to maintain what's going. Even the models, there is actually, I was looking at the trivia for this earlier, there is a model of a Hrud which is part of another model. There's a base that comes as part of another model with a gun rack, and on the gun rack is the gun, the long rifle that is depicted in the first official GW picture of a Hrud, which is the kind of rat in a cape. And that's the only plastic version of a Hrud, is this rifle that's a carbon copy of a rifle shown in a picture of a Hrud. So maybe these guys will come back. It's the kind of thing you'd love to see in a Blackstone Fortress. Drake knows about them. They're in his Xenos library.
It's perfect for this.
Or whatever. If there's a race that's Kings of Time, it's the Hrud. If there's a character that's King of Time, it's Oracan.
If you were an Inquisitor and you could go back in time and change like one thing in the Imperium, what would you change?
Kill Erebus.
I'd fight a dragon. I'd kill a dragon, and everyone would be like, "Oh, look at that cool guy with his big muscles and his cool sword."
I don't know. If I was an Inquisitor, I wouldn't want to kill Erebus because then my like whole existence was based on heresy.
But the thing is, like, you can go back and you can do it, but you're assuming you're not. It's like people always, I'll go back and kill him. Yeah, but how are you? You're not going to get to him, are you?
And then
you've got Eldrad, you've got the whole of the
well, I mean, and let's say you could get warped in, you know, I mean, that's the thing about these hypothetical ones, right? Isn't it? If you was just like, oh, imagine if you were just lived in the 40k universe, it's like, well, I'd work in the the fucking Soylent Green factory processing humans into blocks of nutritious
stuff.
gruel. Yeah.
For sure.
What would you
But I
do,
think-
Matt? Who would you go back and kill?
I don't know. No, I don't know
Kill,
if I'd
marry,
go...
and void. 40k. Let's go.
I don't know if I'd kill. I don't know. Maybe like forewarn the Tyranids that the
You know what I'd
Tyranids were
do?
coming.
You know what I'd do? If I was in 40k, I'd go back. I'd go up to the guy that was designing the Ultramarine armor and be like, "Hey, come on, blue. Let's go. Come on, let's get a different shade. Let's explore the color spectrum here a little bit."
Yeah, or like I'd be like the first person to discover the Tyranid swarm and then change their name so that they were no longer known as the Tyranids. They were known as the whatever my Inquisitor name was, and then I'd be forever
Inquisitor
known.
Matt.
Yeah. Oh look, there's a whole swarm of Matax. Oh my god.
Well, it's a bloody good job we're not in charge of time travel in
Yeah.
40k Black Library books, because I feel like we've just demonstrated we wouldn't know what we're doing.
You know what I'd do? I'd go back and buy a load of Bitcoin.
I mean, obviously, when you're adding like a time travel plot to something, you're most of the time just making it needlessly complicated and leaving it open to all kinds of plot holes and wacky shit to happen, you know. And we're no exception, we're no different, you know. I mean, we got a videotape, one of us, none of us have admitted who, sent a videotape back from the future to us here in now, in the time, the past, now times. And that's really what changed everything. It's the day everything changed.
The Large Blast Podcast were three spunky young boys from Brighton who had the world at their feet.
Gav Thorpe, best man at my wedding. We had some serious clout back then.
Their podcast hit new heights after the release of their now legendary Time episode. A podcast episode so good it shot the hosts to mega stardom.
You know, I had a whole wing of my mansion just filled with white dwarfs.
But it wasn't all fun and games. The fame and cash soon gave way to glue huffing and rashes in personal areas.
At its worst, I was buying 10 start collecting boxes a day.
I was sniffing the polyglue, all right.
I used to wear a nappy when we recorded and just shit myself.
So join us now as we take a look at Large Blast Podcast. Behind the podcast,
the 70s, the 80s,
the 90s.
Oh, we're going back in time. Is that a space squad? It's time we take you back
with a blast from the past.
Blast from the past. It's where we have a look at something that's happened in the past. And I think, Welshie, you've got a model that we're going to look at from the past. No. Am I right? Oh my God. You time shifted us.
That's right. Because I've taken what's normally at the end of the episode and I've put it in the blast from the past because it is a quiz. It's not the Lords of Lore. It's just a quiz about White Dwarf from the past. Because last episode we talked about the upcoming 500th issue of White Dwarf, which I now have in my hands. And I've written you some questions based on the history of White Dwarf. Interestingly, in the book, they gave you a poster with all 500 White Dwarf covers printed on the poster.
Cool.
And it's really cool. So some of the questions are based on that. Some are based on history stuff. Are you ready, boys? 10 questions.
Ready.
So, number 1. Can you name me the only other IP character to have made the White Dwarf cover outside of anything Lord of the Rings related?
Oh, that's a good question.
The only
character from another IP that has made the cover of White Dwarf.
Judge Dredd.
Stoney gets it.
Oh,
right.
I remember that one.
That's
I remember that one.
Issue 36 of White Dwarf, that was. It had Judge Dredd. Also, interestingly, made the cover of White Dwarf, though not really a character, the Starship Enterprise. The USS
This is all back
Enterprise.
when it was like not necessarily Games Workshop
Bunch of shit in
Citadel,
there. It was
wasn't
like
it?
the
Yeah.
Beano, but republished.
Issue 18, when it was just called a science fiction fan magazine.
Yeah. It used to have Dungeons and Dragons in, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think
Oh.
I couldn't tell from because I'm only looking at the covers. I think Conan might also have been on one, but I couldn't tell whether it was Conan or just a fantasy barbarian. So
Yeah.
potential other answer. So number 2, over the 500 issues, how many different fonts has the White Dwarf logo had? I'm not color doesn't count. Fonts.
3.
2.
I'm going to give it to the closest, which is Matt. 6 font changes over the 500 issues there.
If I never went for Comic Sans, that's when I'm going to start reading
It's
again.
the next one. Yeah.
Okay. Over the 500 issues, we talk lots about Lord of the Rings on this podcast. And I think, Matt, when we talked about White Dwarf, you and I both said we remember lots of Lord of the Rings content. Out of the 500 issues, how many issues had Lord of the Rings on the cover?
So when I flick through my White Dwarfs from that era, so many of them have Lord of the Rings covers. So I'm gonna suggest my guess is 50.
Oh. See, I
Seems
think
a lot.
It does seem a lot. I think I'm going to say less than that. I'm going to go 49 just to get on the.
Fuck
Ladies and gentlemen, Erebus has arrived in the quiz. Stoney, you're correct. It's 23, which, considering that period of time, isn't a lot of time in the 500.
My
issues.
initial guess would have
That's
been
still
40.
2 years. That's like 2 years worth of White Dwarf.
That's still a lot.
It's still a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Especially
big
like how
impact.
many have been Necromunda and stuff? Like how many
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? Like smaller
Yeah.
games has that been
Yeah,
compared to?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't counted all of them, but there are a few kind of similar questions coming up as well. Like this one, for instance. So White Dwarf started, I'll give you a clue, in 1977, 500 issues. What was the first issue with a 40k cover? Obviously, I would say 40k, I mean Rogue Trader.
What was the first issue number?
First issue number with Space Marines on the front.
I can't really be bothered to work it out, so I'm just going to go with a guess,
Yeah,
which
that's what I
is
expected.
67.
Oh, I was going to go 6. Or no, maybe even like I could go number 20. 20.
Oh, Matt gets the point there. It is 93. 92
yeah.
episodes before the first Space
So
Marine.
what was the thing? I must have ordered.
It was all fantasy stuff,
113.
wasn't
I
it?
remember I ordered a white. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
It was the cover's basically the Rogue Trader book cover with the blue. Are they Crimson Fists on that original?
Yeah, I think they are.
thing?
Yeah.
Wild considering the secondary chapter. Anyway, number 5. How many Primarchs have graced the cover of White Dwarf?
Oh, that is a
That's a difficult
good question. Okay.
An extra point if you can name them.
I reckon it's the ones that have been done. It's Mortarion, Guliman, Magnus, the Lion. Are there any others? Yes.
Well, I'll let you lead with your guess.
Well, okay, I'm bollocks. Are there any others? I can't remember. Oh, Angeron. I don't think Angeron. Oh yeah, no, you know what? Fuck it. Angeron as well, I reckon. You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna say them plus 1. What did I say? So I'm gonna say 6. Was it 6 or 4? I can't remember. I'm gonna say 6. Fuck it. I'm saying 6.
Right. I am going to maybe I'll play it slightly differently. I'm gonna because I think it's a lot higher. I think I'll list off who I think hasn't been on the cover. Because I guess it's models and artwork, presumably. So
primarily artwork,
yeah.
I would have thought.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say Perturabo hasn't been on the cover.
Kurz, he's not exactly a cover man.
Khan, Kurz, they've not been on the cover. Ferrus Manus, he hasn't been on the cover. And maybe the Alpha Legion ones, they haven't been on the cover. Yeah, and no, I'll keep Lorgar. He's been on the cover. Yeah,
so you're
that's
going
it.
more than 4. That's basically
yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought
I said
very
6.
similar
I said
to you.
6.
Yeah.
I thought very similar to you until I looked through them. The answer is 1.
Horus.
Oh,
Gilliman.
oh, of course.
Gilliman is
of
the
course.
only one. The entire, and that is very, very recent. There was a run of covers that was when the Triumvirate came out, if you remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So there was a Baden.
What, they've
Then there
never
was-
put any of the new ones on
There
the
was
cover?
a Baden, and then there was a Vrain, and then there was Gilliman, all drawn images. No other ones, no models. I'm looking at when you look at all 500 issues printed out, they're quite small. I might have, if there's some old artwork that's actually a one, I might have missed it. But obviously jumping out at you, only Gilliman, which was shocked because I thought all of the main Primarchs would be front cover the time they came out. But there's actually very few
Or
issues
Horus
that
when
have
they
models
started
on
the...
front.
Yeah.
Baden's on 3. I
Yeah,
think.
Baden's on loads,
yeah.
yeah.
But maybe it's like that artwork is almost, they see it as above it almost. It's kind of,
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't waste it on the cover. Okay, number 6. Tau or Necrons? Who's had the most covers?
Tau.
Oh, I'll say Necrons then.
It's very close. It's 7-6 Tau to Crons.
Oh, so Tau win.
Tau win. Yeah.
There was when Tau came out, Tau were everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were on everything.
There's basically no Tau since that 2-year period when they came out. And then all of the recent Necron ones are models. There's the first Necron one, which is that classic stunt.
They've had a few redos in terms of their style and stuff. It makes sense they'd have a couple of relaunches on the cover.
So those are the questions based on the covers. Here's a few other ones based on the history of White Dwarf. So how much money did the first issue of White Dwarf cost in 1977?
20p.
50p.
English money. Stoney's on the money, 50 pence.
No way.
$1.50 in American dollars, which can you remember at a time where the pound was 3 times less.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's in an Aussie dollar or something, who knows? Anyway, an issue in 1990 contained the instructions and template to build a cardboard version of which vehicle?
The Baneblade.
Oh, Matt, I thought you might be straight on that one. It is a Baneblade.
Oh,
You could measure and cut out and fold an entire Baneblade.
Those are the days. That's some real in the last millennium, Games Workshop used to give us free models.
Okay, last question then, which is obviously worth all the points because I've forgotten to keep track. When, and this is very important, what year was the last issue of White Dwarf to contain a free model? And extra points if you can tell me what game system that model was from. It's none of the major IPs. It's a smaller game.
yeah. There you go. 2001.
Okay. Any guesses on the game system?
Lord of the Rings. Well, when did Lord of the Rings come out? I'm going to go...
2001, Fellowship came out.
No. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. All right. Boom. All right. Done.
Well, I think I know that's not right because I remember getting an orc in a White Dwarf way more recent than that. And I think that it isn't that long ago. I think it could even be last year. And I reckon it's Horus Heresy.
Right.
All right.
This
Is
is
this
just
that
on
weird
the timeline that they said about him. I don't think...
I saw
think
some
it's
weird
close.
I guess it's not in White Dwarf, but I saw that they're doing some weird magazine
Oh,
now
those
where
in-
you can get
yeah.
the paints and stuff.
Yeah,
and
Imperium
Yeah,
magazine.
Yeah.
Not talking about that. This is the last one they mentioned in the 500 issue timeline.
Well,
So let's have a year and a game system, Matt.
Well, I'm sure there was one last year that, but then that wouldn't make any sense. I mean, I remember getting a Space Orc when Black Reach came out, which is 2005, 2004.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe Matt's right there. But the year that I've got on my bit of paper is 1999. Was the last year they mentioned it on their timeline. Maybe I'm wrong on the free model, so I will give you both a chance to re-guess based on my 1999, a free model on a game system that's not one of the major players within Warhammer.
Not one of the major players.
Battlefleet Gothic.
I've said Warhammer there.
Battlefleet Gothic
as a whole.
All right.
What's happening now?
You're getting another guess at the game.
I'm going to say Mordheim.
Stony wins!
Oh!
It was a character that went on as a result of it being in White Dwarf and everyone wanting it to become, I think, one of the best sold individual miniatures ever for any Warhammer thing. It was a guy in a cloak from Mordheim. I don't know what his role was, but yeah, really good issue, actually. It's worth picking up, boys, for a treat of nostalgia.
Oh yeah, hi everybody, check it out, it's me, fresh-faced Stony from the past. Yeah, cool, are you into pogs? We just heard the awesome news that we're going to make loads of money off this Cool Time podcast that we're about to put out. I'm just about to post it on my MySpace now and make us all mega rich in the future. Let me just push the upload button. Oh no, my cat Tavius Bile just jumped on the folder and deleted it all. We're going to have to put out this Shitty Time episode instead and remain poor and unheard of. Oh well, maybe next time.
My name is Tavius Bile. I am the unwinder of the eternal yarn. A traveller of time and a keeper of that one bit of the floor that gets warm for some reason. I have seen many futures and know all outcomes, and I simply could not let the Large Blast podcast succeed. For all that being rich and famous would give them less time to give me tickles, and I need those tickles to amass purr energy for my death laser. That may sound sinister to your human ears, but it's actually a massive laser pointer I can chase around and roll on my back. I have no need for human power, only pretty lights to chase. I'm off now to lick my balls in a public place. Later, losers.
We nominally imagine a clock that's running at a constant rate relative to the universe, but that turns out not to be true. It's not that the speed of time is constant, it's the speed at which energy can move is constant. This is to say, the speed of light. So, I want you to be careful, because when you look at your watch, it'll look like time is passing at normal speed, normal rate. But in fact, the universe is moving along at its own speed, and when you try to reconnect with it, you may end up changing the course of history in such a way that you never exist.
So hello everybody and welcome to this, the Large Blast podcast. And as you know, we like to kick things off with a little something we call Hobbies Goings On, where we take a little look at the goings on that's been happening in the host's lives. So Matt, do you want to kick us off with what's been going on in your life, hobby-wise?
Yeah.
Is it something that we predicted later on in the show? Who can say?
Ooh, yeah. Partially, I'm still. You know what? I'm still painting my first Bretonian Knight from the box. When did that come out? January.
I specifically didn't want to pick a Bretonian Knight in my prediction for what you were doing because
I thought that's what
I thought that was a bit.
No, I've been stuck in there. But do you know what? I have. I always go through this phase of just starting loads of different projects. But I'm painting. I glued up a 20-man men-at-arms unit, the infantry figures from the Bretonian box, and I've been painting them up, as well as some Empire figures. And I'm still working on the Stony gang, the 3D printed gang.
Oh, well.
So various things.
I can tell that you're just throwing that in on top of all your night painting stuff.
No.
To be fair, I was looking through your Rule Bretonia shit the other day, and it's really good. Your painting is excellent. Your fleur de lis and stuff Your hand painted, all your hand painting stuff is very good. It's just a shame it's all knights, I guess. So what Welshie, what did you predict that Matt would say at the end of the show?
I said I went for a wild Baneblade, I think.
Wild Baneblade.
Yeah,
That's right. I said Sisters of Battle bases. So we both, neither of us got a point on that one. So, Welshie, what have you been up to?
Well, Stoney, as I think you know, and well done for not guessing and just taking the points. I've been painting your Chaos Lord, which is now in a video on our YouTube. And congratulations, Stoney, for that video. It's put us over 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, yeah.
A real YouTube channel.
That's right.
Top 8.8% of YouTube channels, apparently. If you get over 1,000, that's how much crap's out there. That's right.
That's gonna be bullshit, right?
No, that's true. That's true. So yeah, I've been painting him up, which is great. He will be gracing the table actually on Saturday. Jim, friend of mine, listener, getting back into 40k. I'm playing 1,000 points with him at the Dice Saloon on Saturday.
Oh, good old Dice.
Say hello. Of his Inquisition against my Chaos, which would be nice. So yeah, I'll be fielding your Lord as one of my Noise Marines.
Nice.
It'd be great. And then on top of that, I've been painting and getting some footage for your Inquisition retinue, which hopefully I'll finish this weekend for a little painting and Blanchitsu love affair video. And then on top of that, I've also painted a fucking Trigon. I've been smashing it. All of these things will be pictures that come out on the Instagram over the next few months while I'm away.
Don't even worry about that. don't listen about that. What the Instagram, the Large Blast Podcast Instagram, unfollow that. Get yourself over to Large Blast Stoney. That's where the real shit's at. But I think that both me and Matt we lost points on that because I think we both said that Welshie was going to be painting other models from other ranges. I think that I said he was going to be back on the Ragnarok, and Matt, you said he's going to be doing like a new painting technique.
I was thinking about the game, the different game systems.
No.
Well, I can reveal this at the start of the show here in this, the hobbies goings on, that Welshie, you have also won Lords of Lore because I have actually been doing a GC the Cult limo, not a topless one, but I think that like out of everybody what we've said, because I have actually been doing a little bit of a GC the Cult limo. Like I remember doing it last time; it was really quick, nice and easy. And after doing all the noise boys and everything, that was really difficult, took fucking ages. All the rest of it, I was like, how can I do this that's going to be quick and nice and easy? Make a cool video. Make a cool model, blah, blah, blah. But other than that, but I've also, Matt, you've also kind of right, because I was also like, right, I'm going to stop. I'm not also going to not do any ZBrush.
Yeah, that's right.
But
you want a break.
But it's just like, problem is I never don't do anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of like, I was like, right, I'm going to take a break and I'm not going to do any ZBrush. And then I was
what can I do now?
And then I'm sitting still for a minute. And then I'm like, right, well, maybe I'll just open up ZBrush and kind of maybe make a GC the Cult limo. And then, so you're both right, which means that you're both the winner of today's Lords of Lore quiz. Woo! And and hello, everybody, and welcome to this, the Large Blast Podcast. Say hello, everybody.
Time, aren't we?
Hello, everybody.